Sarah zipped up her jacket as she stepped out of the rusty pickup truck, her boots crunching on the gravel of the remote parking lot. The crisp mountain air bit at her cheeks, carrying the scent of pine and something else, something old and musty that she couldn't quite place. "All right, gang, we made it," Mike called out, his voice echoing off the looming peaks that surrounded them. He was always the enthusiastic one, the driving force behind their annual camping trips. This year, he'd insisted on trying a new spot, deep in the heart of the Cascade Mountains. Emily and Jason climbed out of the back seat, stretching after the long drive. "I don't know, Mike," Emily said, eyeing the dense forest that bordered the lot. "This place gives me the creeps. Are you sure it's safe?" Mike laughed, slapping Jason on the back. "Come on, Em! Where's your sense of adventure? This is going to be epic." As they gathered their gear, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced around, but saw nothing except the swaying pines and the mist-shrouded mountains looming above. The trail started innocently enough, a well-worn path winding its way up the mountainside. But as they climbed higher, the trees grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead to block out most of the late afternoon sun. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with an oppressive silence broken only by their labored breathing and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. "Guys," Jason said after about an hour of hiking, "does anyone else feel like, I don't know, like we're going in circles?" Sarah frowned, realizing he was right. Despite the steady incline, the scenery hadn't changed much. The same gnarled tree roots, the same moss-covered boulders. She pulled out her phone to check the GPS, but there was no signal. "It's fine," Mike insisted, though Sarah noticed a slight tremor in his voice. "The campsite should be just ahead. We'll set up there for the night and get our bearings in the morning." As if on cue, they emerged into a small clearing. Relieved to have a break from the claustrophobic forest, they quickly set up their tents and got a fire going. But as night fell, the unease that had been building all day seemed to intensify. The darkness that enveloped them was absolute, seeming to swallow the feeble light of their campfire, and in that darkness there were sounds, whispers that might have been the wind if the air wasn't so still, rustling that could have been small animals if it didn't seem to come from everywhere at once. "Did you guys hear that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Before anyone could answer, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing off the mountains. It was distant, but unmistakably human. What the hell was that? Jason leapt to his feet, nearly kicking over the fire in his panic. It was probably just an animal," Mike said, but his face had gone pale. Sarah stood up slowly, her heart pounding. "Guys," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "look." She pointed to the edge of the clearing, where the firelight flickered against the trees. There, just beyond the reach of the light, stood a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, and thin, its limbs too long and jointed in all the wrong places. For a moment it stood motionless, and Sarah prayed that it was just a trick of the shadows. Then its head turned, revealing eyes that glowed with an eerie, pale light, and it smiled, a wide, toothy grin that split its face almost in half. Emily's scream shattered the night as the creature took a step forward. In an instant, chaos erupted. They grabbed what they could and ran, plunging blindly into the dark forest. Sarah's lungs burned as she ran, branches whipping at her face. She could hear the others crashing through the undergrowth nearby, and something else, a sound like dry leaves skittering across the forest floor, but faster, closer. A root caught her foot, and she went down hard, the taste of blood filling her mouth as she bit her tongue. She scrambled to her feet, but as she turned to run, she came face to face with the creature. This close, she could see that its skin was a patchwork of bark and fungus, its eyes swirling pools of bioluminescent fluid. It reached for her with hands that ended in long, sharp thorns. Sarah wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't respond. As the creature's cold fingers brushed her cheek, a voice that sounded like cracking wood and rustling leaves filled her head. "Welcome home," it said. "We've been waiting for you." The last thing Sarah saw before the darkness took her was the forest itself coming alive around her, the trees bending and twisting, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. And she realized, in that final moment, that they had never been lost at all. They had been lured. In the days that followed, hikers would report strange sounds echoing from the mountains. Park rangers would search the area, but find no trace of the missing campers, just 4 backpacks abandoned around the ashes of a long cold fire. And deep in the forest, in the shadows of the whispering peaks, 4 new trees would take root, their bark twisted into expressions of eternal screams.